We just received some exclusive news about the royals. The member of royal family just discovered some shocking news about one of their own.
Amid Buckingham's centuries-old walls, where duty and honor are valued above romance, a secret, believed to be long buried, has resurfaced. And this time, it points directly at the crown. After the memorial service for Queen Camilla's close friend, Dame Jilly Cooper, Camilla was abruptly thrust into the center of a palace uproar when King Charles III uncovered a highly confidential letter, together with the Emerald of Windsor brooch, a revered heirloom belonging to the late Queen Elizabeth, inside Dame Jilly's private residence. The revelation has sent shockwaves through the royal family, because beneath a funeral that appeared to hold nothing but grief lies the opening move of a secret powerful enough to fracture England's throne. As Camilla attempts to explain that her actions were meant to preserve the Windsor honor, Charles views the matter as an inexcusable act of betrayal. With him, a man determined to uphold justice, and her, a woman prepared to give up everything to keep her standing, what becomes one of the fiercest clashes in modern royal history begins to unfold, exposing schemes, loyalty, and the unraveling of a love that once promised to remain united through life and death. So why was Camilla in possession of the late Queen Elizabeth's sacred brooch? And why did she entrust that treasure to her closest friend for safekeeping? Was there a hidden agenda behind the decision? On October 6, 2025, England lay beneath a veil of pale gray rain, thin, cold, and unseasonably bitter. News of the death of Dame Jilly Cooper, the celebrated novelist revered as the spirit of modern British literature at the age of 88, rippled through the nation like a sudden shock. Television networks broke from scheduled programming, suspending advertisements to air special tribute segments. Academics, artists, and even members of the British royal family voiced their deep mourning. Yet for Queen Camilla, this loss meant far more than the passing of a cultural icon. It marked the disappearance of the one person who had truly known her as she was. The funeral took place in solemn silence at St. George's Chapel in Windsor, a sacred site that had borne witness to generations of royalty and England's most distinguished figures laid to rest. That morning, crowds gathered along the pathway to the chapel, clutching bunches of white roses. No voices rose among them, only the moan of the wind threading through ancient iron lanterns and the soft splash of footsteps against rain-darkened stone could be heard. The sky itself seemed to mourn, releasing a steady drizzle that clung to every black coat and sent a chill through the air. Amid the procession of official vehicles entering the grounds, the Rolls-Royce carrying Queen Camilla came quietly to a halt. When the door opened, she emerged wrapped in a long black cloak, her face partially hidden behind a fine silk veil. Even so, her reddened, swollen eyes, marked by countless sleepless nights, were impossible to miss. The entire country watched as she stepped forward, no longer a distant emblem of authority, but a woman visibly shaken by a final goodbye. Inside the chapel, the organ echoed with slow, measured notes. Colored light from the stained glass windows spilled softly across the oak coffin, draped in the Union Jack. The royal family was present in full. King Charles III occupied the front row beside Princess Anne and Prince William. A short distance away, Kate Middleton lowered her head in prayer, her eyes clouded with emotion. All present understood that Jilly Cooper had been more than a famous writer. She had also played a quiet role in restoring the royal family's image during turbulent moments with the press. When the priest finished reading from the scriptures, Camilla rose and made her way toward the podium. Each step rang clearly in the hushed chapel. She carried a single sheet of paper, her hands shaking faintly. After a brief silence, her voice emerged, low, strained, and heavy with grief. "Dame Jilly was more than a friend," she said. "She was the one who saw me at my weakest, when the world saw only the crown and its splendor. She wrote from the heart, lived with empathy, and left England not merely with books, but with compassion in an age of turmoil." Quiet sobs drifted from the rear of the chapel. Heads bowed, tears fell without sound. Charles watched her, his expression softening for an instant. It was rare for him to witness such unguarded sincerity from her. As she reached her final words, her voice wavered. "Jilly, I owe you something I may carry with me forever. The trust and forgiveness that only a true friend can offer." She stopped, drew a slow breath, and inclined her head. Gentle applause followed. Not from the public, but from those who had lived within Jilly's pages, who understood that their bond reached far beyond rank or title. When the service concluded, the rain had not let up. Mourners streamed out of the chapel as photographers pressed forward, capturing images of Camilla beneath a black umbrella, holding a bouquet of white tulips, Jilly's favorite flower. By that afternoon, newspapers across the country displayed the photo beneath a bold headline, "Queen in Tears, a rare glimpse of humanity behind the throne." The public responded with sympathy, many writing online that they had never seen Camilla appear so real. Yet none could see the turmoil hidden behind her composed exterior. Her tears were not shed solely for a lost friend. They were born of fear. As the car departed St. George's Chapel, Camilla sat in silence, watching rain streak across the windows. In her hand was a handkerchief Jilly had once given her, gripped tightly throughout the ceremony. Memories surged back, quiet afternoons by the fireplace, conversations about books, aging, and belief. Then those images shattered, replaced by another recollection, a letter she had sent to Jilly 3 years earlier, accompanied by an object strictly forbidden to ever leave the royal family. On that day, her words had been written with trembling hands. "Dear Jilly, please keep this for me. I can trust no one else. If it remains in the palace, I will never sleep peacefully." At the time, Camilla believed only Jilly could guard such a secret. Now her friend rested beneath the earth, and no one knew where the letter, or the object, had gone. Had it been destroyed, or did it still lie somewhere in the modest Gloucestershire home where Jilly had lived among half-finished manuscripts? The more Camilla dwelled on the thought, the faster her heart pounded. She turned toward Charles, ready to speak, then stopped herself. He sat composed, eyes fixed on the passing scenery, unaware that only miles away a secret capable of shattering the royal family's honor lay waiting to be uncovered. As the car turned onto the tree-lined road carpeted with golden leaves leading to Clarence House, the final raindrop slid down the window, blending with Camilla's labored breath. A faint sense of dread took hold within her, that Jilly's death had not only stolen a cherished friend, but was about to set in motion events that would alter all of Windsor Palace. And in the cold stillness of that October afternoon, as the vehicle passed through the royal gates, Camilla tightened her grip on the handkerchief and whispered softly, like a prayer, "Jilly, please keep that secret for me." even in the next world. On the morning of October 8th, 2025, only 2 days after Dame Jilly Cooper's funeral, the Gloucestershire sky remained bleak and cold, with mist spreading thickly along the road toward the old wooden house where she had lived and written for more than 40 years. A white wreath still clung to the iron gate, speckled with raindrops, its rose petals sagging as though the grief itself had not yet lifted. Eleanor, a young maid from the Clarence House Royal Service, had been selected for the task. Camilla had phoned her personally the night before, speaking in a gentle yet unmistakably commanding tone. "Eleanor, go to Jilly's house tomorrow morning. Help the housekeeper sort through her old belongings, manuscripts and keepsakes, and bring them back to Clarence so I can arrange memorials for my dear friend. I want everything organized properly, and no one is to handle her private things. Do you understand?" Eleanor bowed as she answered, the image of the Queen crying at the funeral still lingering in her mind. She was devoted and seldom inquisitive, yet Camilla's voice that night carried something unusual, something beyond sadness, like a quiet, contained unease. The journey from London to Gloucestershire felt long and desolate. The car finally stopped outside the modest home set beside open fields. Jilly Cooper's house looked exactly as it had in magazine features. A tiled roof softened by moss, white-painted window frames, and climbing roses spreading across the walls. Eleanor inhaled, then eased the door open. It was already slightly ajar, a blend of scents drifted out. Old paper, dried lavender, and aged timber, the unmistakable smell of memory, of a life that had now come to an end. An elderly housekeeper met her, his eyes tired. "Her study is upstairs. The desk drawer is still locked. I didn't dare go near it," he said, his voice rough. Eleanor gave a small nod and went directly up to the second floor. The study felt like a world apart. Books packed tightly into shelves, loose manuscripts strewn across the desk, and photographs featuring Queen Camilla, Princess Anne, and the late Queen Elizabeth. At the center stood a large oak desk, still holding a dried teacup beside a quill and an unfinished notebook. Eleanor set to work with care. She gathered pages, wiped dust from frames, and packed items neatly into boxes. But when she crouched by the lowest drawer, she noticed something odd, a fine split in the wood, as if someone had tried to conceal something underneath. Using a paper knife, she gently levered it open, and to her surprise, she uncovered a thick envelope sealed with red wax, stamped with the royal insignia. A crown above two interlocking C's, Camilla's emblem. Eleanor's chest tightened. After nearly 8 years of service, she knew exactly what a royal wax seal meant. Documents marked that way were strictly confidential. But why would such a thing be hidden in Jilly Cooper's home? No matter how close she was to the royals, she was still a commoner. She should never have been entrusted with something like this. Eleanor lifted the envelope with caution. The paper was heavy and yellowed with age, as though it had been stored away for a long time. One corner of the wax had cracked slightly, enough that it could be opened without fully breaking the seal. She hesitated for a moment, but in the end, curiosity overcame fear. Carefully, she opened it. Inside lay a handwritten letter in faded ink, along with a small bundle wrapped in green velvet. The moment she touched it, she felt the unmistakable weight of precious metal. When she unfolded the velvet, daylight from the window flashed across an emerald about the size of a thumbnail, set into an antique gold frame carved with intricate dragons and Tudor roses. On the back, A Latin inscription had been etched. Fide et honore, with faith and honor. Eleanor sucked in a sharp breath. She recognized it at once, the Emerald of Windsor brooch, an heirloom seen in photographs of Queen Elizabeth II during the 1960s. It represented loyalty and was granted only to the chosen spiritual heir of the royal family. After Elizabeth's death, the brooch had vanished from public view. Newspapers had guessed it was secured in the royal vaults, but the palace had never confirmed anything. With trembling fingers, Eleanor read the letter. The slanted black handwriting revealed a shaky hand, one she knew belonged to the Queen. "Dear Jilly, keep this for me. I cannot risk leaving it in the palace. If it is discovered, I could lose everything. When the time is right, I will come for it. Camilla." Eleanor froze. Her eyes moved to the longer passage above, unquoted, more extensive and far colder in tone. "When you read this letter, Jilly, you will understand why I sent this to you. In Queen Elizabeth's private will, the brooch was not left to me. She left it to Anne, the one she trusted as the only person worthy of representing Windsor's honor. I could not allow that. If the public learned the brooch was never meant for the Queen Consort, they would see me as an intruder. They would say this throne is the outcome of an illegitimate affair, not rightful succession. I did not take it to keep for myself, but to shield the royal family's image, to spare Charles a crisis of faith. Please help me conceal it, Jilly. You are the only person I can trust." The letter slipped from Eleanor's hands as they began to shake uncontrollably. A cold film of sweat formed at her temples. She could hardly process what she had just read. A queen at the head of the royal family, secretly removing a symbol of loyalty and honor simply out of fear that someone else would receive it. Questions crashed through her mind. What if another person discovered it? What if the letter ever surfaced publicly? What if Princess Anne already knew? Eleanor stared around the room. The silence was so complete she could hear the steady ticking of the clock. In one corner sat a photograph of Jilly and Camilla, both smiling brightly at the Chatsworth Book Festival only last month. Who could have imagined that, only days later, one would be in the grave, while the other carried a secret capable of bringing down England's throne? Forcing herself to move, Eleanor carefully closed the envelope, trying to make the red wax look untouched. She wrapped the brooch again in its velvet, slipped it among the notebooks, and packed it together with Jilly's unfinished manuscripts. She told herself firmly, "No one else will see this. I'll take everything back to Clarence, place it in the Queen's room, and she'll decide what comes next." Yet even as she tried to steady herself, her pulse raced. Dragging her suitcase out of the study, she looked back one last time. The room sat in dim twilight, the final sunlight pushing through old curtains and catching dust motes floating in the air. And at that very moment, Camilla was not at home. She had gone out beyond the royal grounds to shop for a few necessities. Roughly an hour later, King Charles III came back from a meeting with the Royal Council. He looked drained, peeling off his gloves, loosening his tie, his face carrying the strain of long, tightly wound days. As he walked past Camilla's room, he noticed the door was slightly open and the room appeared empty. Late afternoon sunlight angled through the curtains, falling across a wooden table where an unfamiliar cloth bag sat conspicuously in an otherwise orderly space. Charles stopped. It struck him as odd. Camilla was meticulous, and would never leave something unidentified lying around in her chambers. He scanned the room and stepped closer. The bag was secured with a green ribbon and carried a faint lavender scent, the same fragrance Camilla liked to use on her handkerchiefs. A small tag on the handle read, "Documents, Dame J.C." "Jilly Cooper?" Charles murmured under his breath. The name pulled at his memory. 2 days earlier at the funeral, Camilla had broken down in front of her friend's coffin, a rare display of raw vulnerability. Perhaps, he thought, these were keepsakes she wanted to preserve. He hesitated only briefly, then untied the ribbon and opened the bag. Inside were layers of papers and personal items, a silver-framed photograph, an old postcard, several notebooks. But what caught his attention was a green velvet bundle placed carefully at the center. In the dimming light, the velvet held a deep, wintry sheen. Charles opened it gently, and the emerald brooch flashed back at him with a cold brilliance that made his heart jolt. He knew it instantly. The Emerald of Windsor. There was no possibility of confusion. It was the heirloom his late mother, Queen Elizabeth, had regarded as the emblem of honor and loyalty, a treasure meant to be passed only to the truly worthy successor. Charles remembered clearly. After his mother's funeral, it had been recorded and secured in the treasure vault. So why was it here, inside Camilla's room, packed in a bag marked Dame J.C.? Beside the velvet bundle lay a thick envelope sealed in red wax, stamped with Camilla's crown. His fingers trembled slightly. Even with a sharp, painful certainty already forming in his chest, he forced himself to inhale before breaking the seal. The letter inside was written in a hand he recognized immediately, soft, slightly slanted, and unmistakably belonging to the woman he called his wife. "Dear Jilly, keep this for me. I dare not leave it in the palace. It could make me lose everything if discovered. When the time allows, I'll retrieve it." Those short lines hit him like blades. Charles felt his blood turn icy. He read them once, then again, until his gaze rose to the opening section, the part Eleanor had never dared to copy. In Queen Elizabeth's private will, the brooch was left to Anne. "I couldn't let that happen. If the public knew, they'd see me as a usurper. I took it to protect the royal family and to protect Charles." Charles crushed the paper in his fist, his chest tightening until it hurt. "Protect me?" he whispered, the words edged with bitterness. What Camilla described as protection looked to him like a violation of royal honor, nothing less than betrayal. His eyes returned to the brooch. Window light refracted through the stone, casting a green glow that resembled a serpent's stare. In that shimmering gaze, he saw his mother again, Queen Elizabeth, whose lessons had been unwavering. Once you place your hand on the crown, private matters must disappear. The honor of the royal family is holier than love. And now, the very woman he had defended, shielded in public, stood beside despite everything, had committed a supreme taboo. She had removed a sacred royal treasure from the family's custody. For a long while, Charles did not move. At last, with a shaking hand, he returned the letter to the bag. The air in the room felt heavy, almost suffocating. Somewhere in the distance, the clock struck 5, steady and unforgiving. His fists clenched until his knuckles blanched. Anger spread through him, rage not only at the act itself, but at the realization that he had been kept in the dark. At that moment, Camilla came back from her shopping. She stopped short, startled to find Charles standing with his back to her. On the table, the bag lay open, the brooch catching the light. "Charles, what are you doing?" Her voice wavered. Without turning, he answered slowly. Each word weighted like iron. I'm revisiting a piece of history, one you chose to rewrite with your own hand. Camilla stiffened and hurried forward. The instant she saw the opened letter, the color drained from her face. You read it? Charles turned to face her. His eyes were dark, like a storm about to break. Yes, he said, and I can't tell whether I'm more shattered or repulsed. Camilla struggled for words. I only wanted to protect your honor, ours. If people found out the brooch was meant for Anne, they would. Enough, Charles snapped, slamming the letter onto the table. You don't defend honor through concealment and treachery. You preserve it with truth. Camilla fell silent, tears rising in her eyes. I did it because I was afraid, Charles. Afraid I'd never be accepted. Afraid they'd say I stole a place I didn't deserve. Jilly only kept it for me. She's gone, Charles cut in, his voice sharp as steel. And in a way, she carried your secret into the grave. But unfortunately for you, I found it. The room seemed to lock in place. Outside, the sun fully disappeared, leaving only a thin, pale gold wash across Camilla's face. White with confusion and fear. Charles studied her for a long moment, then spoke softly, though his words landed like a sentence. You've made me choose between love and honor, and you know this family doesn't endure on love. With that, he walked out, his footsteps heavy. The door slammed behind him, leaving Camilla alone in the dimness, where the last trace of dusk glinted off the brooch and threw a shadow on the wall, like a wound that would not stop bleeding. She collapsed into a chair and covered her face with her hands. In her mind, Jilly's old warning echoed. Once you choose to be queen, remember, friendship and love become debts. Now that debt had come due, and it was Eleanor, the loyal maid who never meant harm, who had unknowingly opened the door to fate. After the brutal confrontation, Charles walked out, leaving Camilla collapsed in the gloom. His footsteps rang down the corridor like weighted blows against the stillness of Clarence's house. Outside, rain began to fall again, tapping against the roof tiles, blending with the uneven breaths of a woman who felt the last of her trust slip away. Charles headed straight for the Royal Library, the one place only he was permitted to lock and unlock. He set Camilla's letter on the table, placing it beside the Emerald of Windsor brooch. Under the chandelier, the stone caught the light in a way that felt icy and unforgiving. In that moment, everything aligned into a single truth. Camilla had violated the honor of the royal family, and he could no longer justify remaining silent. He reached for the desk telephone, his voice rough but final. Call Princess Anne, and William as well. Tell them I need a meeting tonight. No postponements. Roughly an hour later, the Bentley carrying Princess Anne pulled up at the gate. She entered quickly, her expression hard, her eyes flickering with alarm when she saw her brother waiting. Soon after, William arrived. He bowed to his father, then quietly took in the room's oppressive atmosphere. Charles wasted no time on explanations. He opened a wooden box, removed the letter and the brooch, and set both in the middle of the table. This, he said, his voice heavy, is what your mother intended for Anne, and it's what Camilla has kept hidden for 3 years. Anne stared, stunned. She picked up the letter and read line by line, her face shifting as she went. My God! She took it from the treasure vault? And she wrote this? William remained beside her in silence. but his eyes showed a sharp mix of anger and disappointment. Charles gave a small nod, lowering his voice. "She claims she did it to protect me, but all I can see is treachery. If the public learns the Queen Consort once stole a royal treasure, I lose everything: credibility, stature, and our mother's honor." Anne met her brother's gaze, her tone unwavering. "Charles, you already know what must be done. We cannot keep her in the palace for even one more day. Windsor's honor cannot be hidden behind tears." William nodded in agreement. "We have to be transparent. I'll coordinate with the communications office. Father, you only need to make one point unmistakable. The royal family will not tolerate deception." Charles looked from his sister to his son, his closest blood, and then inclined his head slightly. In the dim light, his face carried both determination and grief. "Very well, tomorrow morning, I'll make the announcement. Camilla will have to leave the palace. No title, no privileges. And history will record that my reign corrected a mistake." Outside, thunder rolled in the distance, lingering in the air. Anne gripped her necklace tightly. William stared toward the window, and Charles sat without speaking, his eyes locked on the brooch, resting on the table, its green gleam reflecting across his face like the light of justice, and like a wound that would never truly heal. On the morning of October 10th, 2025, London lay buried beneath a dense blanket of fog. Buckingham Palace appeared shrouded in white, lending the scene a weight and gravity deeper than usual. Outside the palace gates, hundreds of journalists had gathered at dawn, cameras and microphones trained on a large podium erected in the courtyard. Word of an emergency press conference by the king spread rapidly, sparking intense speculation throughout England. Inside the palace, Charles III stood before a mirror, straightening his tie for the final time. His face looked worn from sleepless nights, eyes darkened, features drawn, yet his gaze remained firm and unwavering. On the table nearby, the Emerald of Windsor brooch rested inside a small glass case, beside a copy of Camilla's letter, evidence that could not be denied. At the podium, Charles stood upright, his hands gripping the wooden lectern engraved with the royal crest. His voice carried clearly, measured, steady, and resolute, cutting through the heavy air. "Today, I have called this press conference not to address matters of politics, but to defend what is most sacred to the British royal family: honor and loyalty." The reporters fell silent. Charles paused briefly, glancing at the documents before him, then continued. "During the process of reviewing and reorganizing the legacy of the late Queen Elizabeth II, we uncovered a deeply painful truth. A royal heirloom, the Emerald of Windsor brooch, a symbol of loyalty, was removed from the treasure vault and concealed in violation of protocol. Alongside it was a letter written by Queen Camilla herself and sent to her late friend, Dame Jilly Cooper. A ripple of murmurs spread through the crowd. Cameras shifted rapidly, capturing every nuance of the king's expression. Charles signaled, and an aide stepped forward with the glass case containing the brooch. He lifted the lid, the emerald catching the light with a cold, metallic green glow. "This," he said, his voice tightening, "is the piece my mother, Queen Elizabeth, intended to bestow upon Princess Anne, recognizing her as worthy of representing the spirit and values of the royal family. Yet it was taken and hidden where no one would think to look." He stopped again. Every eye remained fixed on him. Pain and anger were etched across his face. In that letter, Queen Camilla acknowledges her actions, claiming they were meant to protect the honor of the royal family. But to me, and to the people of England, honor cannot be preserved through deception. A single camera shutter clicked, then the room fell completely still. Charles looked directly into the television lenses, his voice lowering, as though addressing millions watching from their homes. I, Charles III, accept responsibility for the failures of my reign. However, the betrayal committed by the person I trusted most is something I cannot conceal. Effective immediately, Camilla Parker Bowles will step down from all public duties, her title of Queen Consort will be revoked, and she will leave the palace until further notice. A wave of shock rippled through the audience before settling into stunned silence. Reporters exchanged glances, scarcely believing what they had just heard. A king had publicly dismissed his own queen consort before the entire world. Charles drew a slow breath, then inclined his head slightly. Thank you, England, for your trust. The honor of Windsor will endure. At the same moment, inside Clarence House, Camilla sat alone in a bare room. The television was on, broadcasting the press conference live. Charles's face filled the screen, his voice calm and decisive. When he spoke the words, "The betrayal by the one I trusted most," Camilla's hands began to shake. The teacup slipped from her grasp and shattered on the floor. She did not cry. She remained seated, watching silently as the man with whom she had weathered half a lifetime of storms now turned away from her before the eyes of the world. Outside the window, rain began to fall once more, slow, heavy drops. In her mind, the green gleam of the brooch returned, the same light that had destroyed everything. Camilla rose. In her hand was only the handkerchief Jilly had once given her. She looked around the room for the final time, once alive with flowers, wine, and laughter, now hollow and empty. Each step echoed like a farewell to the person she had been. At the doorway, she stopped. Reporters were already waiting, flashes bursting blindingly. Camilla put on a wide-brimmed black hat and said nothing. Within moments, her image, the woman who had once stood at the center of Britain's power, appeared across newspapers worldwide beneath the headline, "Camilla leaves the palace, our reign ends in tears and silence." The car passed through the gates of Buckingham Palace and disappeared into the thick fog. Inside, Camilla sat unmoving as streetlights streaked briefly across her face. She thought of Jilly, the friend who had carried the secret to her grave, and murmured without realizing, "Jilly, perhaps you were right. Sin, no matter how carefully hidden, always finds its way back." The vehicle eventually stopped in the Wiltshire countryside, once home to her family estate. There were no guards now, no noise, only wind and the damp scent of wild grass. Camilla stepped out, the door closing behind her with a cold finality. Like a sentence being passed, elsewhere, lightning flashed, illuminating glass and stone, throwing the emerald's green light across Charles's face, carving into it the loneliness of a king who had made the most righteous and most painful decision of his life. Far away, in a small house in Wiltshire, Camilla sat beside a fireplace, flames reflected in her tear-filled eyes. On the table, Jilly's handkerchief lay motionless beside a cold cup of tea. She closed her eyes and whispered softly, "For their honor, I've paid the price. But the cost was too high, Jilly." The fire flickered, casting red shadows on the wall, where an old photograph hung, two women smiling in the sunlight, Camilla and Jilly, from a distant time when honor had not yet become a shadow crushing human hearts. And so, on a damp, dark London night, a reign ended quietly. Not with trumpets or ceremony, but with the steady drip of rain on stone, like a final goodbye to a woman who once touched power, only to lose everything because of a secret that should never have been kept. If you were in Camilla's place, would you dare to keep such a secret to protect your honor, knowing that one day you would have to pay the price? In your view, within the royal family, what truly holds greater value, power, or absolute loyalty to the truth? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.